Revenue from away and cup match ticket sales go to the victims of the war in Ukraine. It's after the government amended the club's special licence, allowing them to sell certain tickets again. New sales have been banned after owner Roman Abramovich was sanctioned. Stamford Bridge will still only be able to welcome home supporters who have a season ticket, though. England and Wolves defender Conor Cody says it would be amazing to have a Euros on home soil if the UK and Ireland are successful with their bid for Euro 2028.
It'd be incredible, absolutely incredible. I think for the country, I think for people of this country, I think it'd be amazing. Yeah, we've seen what obviously the summer can do, having the games at Wembley and how amazing that was. So I think it'd be absolutely incredible, whether I'm there or not.
He's with the national team ahead of international friendlies against Switzerland and the Ivory Coast. A joint bid from the UK and Ireland for the tournament will face competition from Turkey and Russia, though, with a decision to be made by UEFA next month. Meanwhile, Wales aim to take a step closer to a place in this year's World Cup in Qatar when they take on Austria in their playoff semi-final tonight. A victory in Cardiff would keep alive their hopes of reaching the tournament for the first time since 1958. Wales manager Rob Page is confident his team can handle the pressure.
We're not going to big it up too much. We've proven in the past the big games, the big players turn up. I know the players are going to be there. They understand the importance of the game. What I say in the changing room before the lads go out will come from the heart.
Scotland were due to play Ukraine in the other semi, but it's been postponed due to Russia's invasion of the country. They'll now play Poland in a friendly tonight instead. And England's women have thrashed Pakistan to move a step closer to securing a place in the semi-finals of the Women's Cricket World Cup. They bowled their opponents out for just 106 runs before chasing down the target inside 20 overs.
Asma Mir and Stig Abel with Times Radio Breakfast.
Good morning to you. It's 9:37. We're going to try and do a special Q&A now on the Spring Statement, what it means for you, what it means for the economics of the country, what it means for the politics as well. We've had lots of questions about the Spring Statement, and so here to answer them, back in the studios, Lucy Fisher, our chief political commentator, and Dominic O'Connell, our business correspondent. Morning again to both of you.
Morning. Good morning.
You can watch on YouTube on the Times radio channel, and you can also find the link via the Times website. Click on Spring Statement 2022. Your questions answered, and you can watch along as we have this conversation.
Right, let's start then. Jeff has sent in a question, and here it is. Will the increase in the national insurance threshold mean that those earning less, part-time people, for example, will no longer be achieving contribution years towards their state pensions or towards benefits based on national insurance contributions for eligibility? And there's a similar question from Carol. I hadn't even thought about that. Dominic?
Definitely one for Lucy.
Let's start easy, shall we?
The whole question of contributory benefits is a really complicated one, and it is actually, although people have in their minds this idea that you need to be paying national insurance contributions in order to qualify there's a series of benefits actually, maternity allowance, the basic state pension, and I can't remember the ones off the top of my head, but there's a few of them which, in theory, require national insurance contributions. But the truth is that you have to go quite a long way not to qualify for these benefits in the real world, because even if you don't earn the minimum, you're often regarded as having a national insurance contribution. You can earn less than the stated amount, less than the threshold per week, and still get it. And even if you don't pay it, you still probably make it up on benefits when it comes to retirement time. It is a very complicated question. The answer is probably no, you don't, but it doesn't matter that you don't.
Okay. Lucy, would you like to add anything to that?
Well, I think Dominic gave a pretty comprehensive answer there, but I did note yesterday the likes of Hargreaves Lansdown, the financial services company, making public their concerns about what the effects of this would be. So I think that certainly it's something the government needs to explain more clearly.
Let's talk about energy bills. The Times subscribers asked this. It's probably for you, Lucy, in the first instance. My energy bill is set to be £2,500, 28% of my only state pension. Why no help for me? And I guess the question is, did you expect more support from Rishi Sunak for pensioners? And this question of the state pension going even less far as the cost of living crisis looms?
Well, it's a two-part question, that, isn't it? Because the first part is about energy bills, and that does sound very high indeed, £2,800. Rishi Sunak brought forward a £9.1 billion package last month. Already many critics think it's outdated. That will see people offered £150 rebate in their council tax next month, and then a £200 loan in the autumn that will have to be paid back in subsequent years. Everyone I was speaking to in Parliament yesterday thought he's going to have to do more in the autumn budget on help for people facing these rising energy bills. We know they're going up by almost double next month. The price cap could rise by up to double again, analysts think, in October. So, in fact, that figure of 2,800 is what the OBR thinks the average household could be paying come October for energy.
We also know that old people vote and old people vote Tory.
Yes.
So presumably, the pension triple lock has gone, or is going to be temporarily halted. Do you think he's going to have to recalibrate how he appeals to older voters as we get closer to the election? Because ultimately, for the Tories to win, they not only need the red wall to hold a little bit, they need people over the age of 60 to vote for them in mass numbers.
Well, that's absolutely right. The suspension of the pensions triple lock, a key manifesto pledge, was suspended long before the spring statement. So it's been a long-running controversy that the state pension, like all benefits next month, will be upgraded by 3.1%, which was the inflation figure back in September. Now, that falls far short of 8.7%, which is what inflation is going to get to later this year, and will leave many pensioners and other benefit claimants falling far short and seeing a real terms cut in their income. So it is a big problem for Rishi Sunak.
Just to say, funnily enough, if they had stuck with the triple lock, the April increase that Lucy refers to wouldn't have been 3.1%, it would have been 8.1%, which, funnily enough, is where inflation's going to end up at the end of the year. So pensioners would have been fine if they had stuck to the triple lock, but it would have been cripplingly expensive for the Exchequer. So
what maybe if there's an election in 2024, they'll have to look again at all that. Just a technical energy question, Dom, which I think is for you. Stephen says, I just about get gas bills going up, but I don't understand why electricity bills are raising as much. We generate most of this in the UK. Why would electricity be going up?
Well, because we use gas to generate about 40% of our electricity.
So we're still reliant on the global markets?
Yes.
Goodness me. If you're just joining us, the voices you hear are Dominic O'Connell, our business correspondent, and Lucy Fisher, our chief political commentator, and they are answering all your questions stemming from the spring statement. You can watch this on YouTube on the Times Radio channel, and you can also find the link via the Times website. Just go to the Times website and click on Spring Statement 2022. Your questions answered, or as I say, just go to our YouTube channel. Right, moving on now. And by the way, any questions that you have, get them in quickly. We're here till 10 o'clock, 87222. Start your message with the word Times or tweet us at Times Radio. Jeremy has a question. As someone who would be affected by what I'm suggesting, I don't see why the Chancellor could not have introduced an additional tax on the incomes of more affluent retired people. It seems to be unfair that tax is being increased on poorer people who are working, although the higher kick-in point on that is to be welcomed. But why not tax a bit more those of us who are retired and could afford to pay a bit more? And I mean, Lucy, this has been a kind of recurrent theme throughout this whole debate about national insurance, that you are taxing people who work as opposed to people who have pensions or income from property.
Well, that's right. And there was a lot of chin scratching yesterday about why the Chancellor, in the face of so much political pressure from his cabinet, from the backbenchers, from the opposition, pressed ahead with this rise in the national insurance rate, which, penalises those with earned income, and yet offered this income tax cut in 2 years' time, which helps people with unearned incomes. That helps pensioners, investors, landlords. And I think there is anger about the fairness of that. And some people are questioning whether really it was a very sort of circuitous formulation to get to the outcome that he could say that he's tax cutting without having to lose face by U-turning on the national insurance rise.
But are those people, the people who have income through those particular routes, are they more likely to be Tory voters?
Well, exactly. As we've just been saying, you're right. Wealthy pensioners are the bedrock of the Conservatives' traditional base, and certainly that will have been a major factor in the Chancellor's decision not to target those people more.
Dominic, when is the last time that these people that we keep talking about were targeted in any meaningful way?
Well, I slightly disagree in that they are being targeted because of the triple lock being dropped. So if pensions go up by 3% next month, then that's a 5% loss of spending power because inflation is going to hit 8% this year. That's a fixed income for pensioners. So it is quite tough. In terms of wealthier people, I think it's a long time since any Conservative administration has introduced any kind of a wealth tax.
Yeah.
Having said that, it's a common fallacy that the UK tax system is it goes easy on higher earners. The top 1% pay about 50% of all tax. So it's we do have quite a progressive tax system.
Well,
although I can hear Twitter going mad as I speak.
No, but there's a really, really interesting table in the Times today, which taught, here we go, people who earn, wait for it, £250,000. Yep, keep dreaming. Their income after tax is 2021 to 22 is 143,000, and in the next tax year will be 140,000. So from 250 to 140. So I take your point.
Someone else asked a question about the fuel tax, which is why, and this probably, Lucy, is a question about targeting, which we were just talking about there. Is cutting fuel duty will cost the public more to subsidise people driving in London in their Range Rover, and it will worsen the climate crisis. When Asma talked about the fuel duty cut, the point that taking 5p off the price of a litre takes the fuel prices back to 2 weeks ago. It's not actually necessarily altering very much. And one of the things that Rishi Sunak said was lots of people have campaigned for it, which felt almost like an admission that, the Sun famously campaigns on fuel duty and has done an incredibly strong job over years to keep fuel duty the same. It felt that the reason why fuel duty is being cut is it's a successful campaign, not necessarily the best way of giving more money to poorer people.
Well, it's certainly the case that there is this incredibly strong lobby within the Conservative Party, led by Rob Halfon, former minister, very successful campaigner. And they have, year after year, since 2011, kept fuel duty frozen, gone even further this year in succeeding in getting Rishi Sunak to drop it. I think the listener who asked the question is right to say, of course, it does benefit people who drive Chelsea tractors in London. But outside of major cities, many lower medium income families own cars. Often it's the only sort of viable mode of transport when there isn't much public transport available. So I don't think it's only helping motorists doesn't only help the wealthiest people. But you're right. And I also wonder how much people are going to feel the benefit of this 5 pence cut. It is expensive for the Exchequer, and yet the cost of filling up an average family car now has got to about £100. This will take less than £4 off the price of that. It takes the price of petrol back to where it was only a week or so ago, and with the volatility in the market, the prices could continue to go up for months to come.
Dom, the same person, says, could the money have been better used to raise the income tax threshold higher?
Quite possibly, and just following on to Lucy's point, an awful lot of retailers won't pass this on, and there's been a lot of commentary around at the moment.
They don't have to, do they?
They don't have to, and it'll just be lost in the noise of, driving past one station. And a couple of the big retailers did announce they were passing on last night. Two of the big supermarket chains said they would cut by 6p a litre straight away. But for an awful lot of independent forecourts, you won't see a change at all, I suspect.
Is it true, or is it an urban myth that the petrol that's already, and I should know because my dad had petrol stations back in the 70s and 80s, the petrol that's already been bought is at the old rate, but it'll only kick in if it's new petrol that's delivered.
You're pushing me beyond the envelope of my message.
I love everything about petrol. Sorry.
I think if our business correspondent and a ski-on of a petrol family can't answer that question, then there's no hope whatsoever.
Dominic and Lucy, thank you for the moment. We'll be back in a minute. If you want to send in a question, please do. We're here till 10 o'clock, 87222. Start your message with the word Times. And remember, you can watch on YouTube on the Times Radio channel, and you can also find the link via the Times website. Just click on Spring Statement 2022. Your questions answered. 9:48 Times Radio Breakfast.
Mariella Frostrup, this afternoon from 1 on Times Radio.
Amid the most acute cost of living crisis in a generation, we'll continue to mop up the analysis of the Chancellor Rishi Sunak's spring statement and ask whether the rise in fuel and energy costs hit home the importance of renewables. In the wake of the return of Nazanin Zaghari Ratcliffe, what must it be like to be imprisoned in a far-off land? We'll speak to those still fighting for their loved ones' release abroad. And could Putin really end up in a dock for war crimes? I'll be joined by a defence lawyer and a prosecutor who've both worked on cases at the International Criminal Court and asking their expert opinion.
Mariella Frostrup, this afternoon from 1 on Times Radio.
Whether you fancy moving to the country or dream of taking early retirement, a tax-efficient stocks and shares ISA from John Lewis can help you prepare for all the big milestones to come. Little moments can build big futures. Go to johnlewisfinance.com to find out more. As with all investing, your capital is at risk. Tax treatment depends on individual circumstances and may change in the future. John Lewis Investment Services are provided by Nutmeg Saving and Investment Limited.
Times Radio Breakfast.
Right, we're answering all your questions on the Spring Statement 2022, and you can watch along on YouTube. It's a much more enjoyable, even more enjoyable experience than just, inverted commas, listening to it. We have Lucy Fisher, our chief political commentator, and Dominic O'Connell, our business correspondent. We're going to move on now and talk about solar panels. Many of you have been getting in touch. Susan has asked, I'm having a solar panel battery system installed next week. My quote includes a VAT payment. Will I still need to pay this? And should I call my supplier to discuss this development? Dominic O'Connell. You look like a man with a solar panel.
I don't have a solar panel. She might want to have a chat to her supplier about retiming the installation, because I'm not exactly sure of the date when it comes in. It applies to solar panels, to insulation. Doesn't apply to battery storage, as far as I can see. So, which if you're trying to put one of these things in, that can be a big chunk of the cost. The batteries are expensive, but the cut will not apply to battery storage. Can I just correct one thing I said earlier? The top 1% of taxpayers pay 30% of all income tax, not half.
That's still a lot, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is that or not? Wow. Well, people can make that judgment. Interest rates. There's both an economic and a political question here, I think. The question is, if inflation is rising above the target set, why have the Bank of England not raised interest rates? They have raised interest rates recently, Dom. But there's an interesting question that if inflation is being caused by factors outside of the consumer economy in this country, they're being buffeted by global impacts. Getting people to stop spending as much as a way of decreasing inflation won't necessarily impact it as well. And you can end up with a double whammy, can't you? People getting hit by high interest rates and high inflation.
Yeah, there is a big debate going on about how effective increasing interest rates will be in controlling inflation, given most of it comes from outside the economy, outside the UK economy. We're not a closed economy, far from it. In fact, the OBR went out of its way yesterday to talk about how dependent we are on imports, particularly energy imports. But inflation is inflation. And the way that central banks tend to control it is by raising interest rates. They try and suppress demand. They try, in a way, to create a recession. Yeah. So it's a crude tool. It's a bit like chemotherapy, perhaps. It's a crude tool, but it can work. If you suppress demand, then inflation will go down.
Lucy, I mean, it's not the responsibility of the government to set interest rates, it's the Bank of England. Does that shield the government at all when it comes to this? Because we are so used that many people, I include myself, I've only ever owned a house when there have been very, very low interest rates my entire adult life. And yet people in previous generations will have had interest rates of up to 15% or whatever it was in the 70s and 80s. How much are the government shielded by it being a Bank of England decision? Or how much, if people are their mortgages are being screwed and they're seeing inflation anyway, how much will that all be placed on the plate of the government?
I think a lot of it falls in the lap of the government. The anger, as you say, the shock, I think, that many people are in store for if rates rise further is something that people in the cabinet are certainly very cognizant of. I was really struck yesterday on just something that the Times picked up, that in the cabinet, when Rishi Sunak presented his plan to his colleagues before going to the Commons, that both Jacob Rees-Mogg and Kit Malthouse, two ministers, made the argument for later this year cutting significantly public spending to try and rein in inflation. Pretty bold political argument to make, not one I'm sure Rishi Sunak, with an eye on his popularity ratings, will be going for. But I think that's certainly an argument that some of those hardline fiscal conservatives, those small state Tories, will be talking about more vocally in the months to come.
We're going to talk about stagflation now. Stephen has asked, the elephant in the room is no one believes these policies will change the inevitable recession and stagflation over the next 2 years. Does the Chancellor really deep down believe any of his actions today will prevent the economy from recession and stagflation? Dominic, this is a conversation we were having around about 5:15 a.m.
Yeah, definitely stagflation. We're already in an era of stagflation where inflation is running high and growth is low, so we're already there. Recession is not inevitable, though, and the UK economy has proved rather resilient, actually, from a whole string of shocks so far this century. There's a great book about to come out about the UK economy called "Just Muddling Through: A 200-Year History of the UK Economy," and that's a bit. I think one of the big issues that Sunak has, though, is that this 20 billion, of headroom that he has against his own fiscal targets, that is entirely reliant on some pretty punchy assessments of how quickly the UK can grow, how quickly productivity can grow. And there are all these other things happening, like the war in Ukraine, energy shortages, all that kind of stuff. So and one of the first things he said yesterday was that we should be prepared for the economy to get worse. So absolutely, it could get a lot worse, and all these hopes for tax cuts ahead of an election might just go. A recession is not guaranteed, though, but stagflation is already here.
Oh, well, that's good to hear. Lucy, Rishi Sunak must be a bit annoyed because he must feel impotent because, he got the job, the coronavirus happened, now this, all the kind of global factors that are affecting the economy. Do we have an idea of how frustrated he must feel when all these external factors are affecting what he can and can't do?
Well, I'm sure he does feel frustrated, as he said to you earlier. It's not an easy job being Chancellor, and he sort of appreciated you recognising that. I do think there are some opportunities that he took advantage of and exploited during COVID. He made the furlough scheme like this massive, beneficent package, with his signature on a cheque from him to you, the public, without really making the argument that this is, the government's equivalent to a massive credit card loan that needs to be paid back with interest later. And so I think he's going to reap some of the problems of the way he has positioned himself as this beneficent Chancellor, giving all these handouts. That's something that can't continue given the state of the finances, and that's something that isn't, necessarily affected by the global conditions.
The other thing I think affects Sunak and our perception of Sunak is just how quickly the spring statement has unravelled. When Gordon Brown was Chancellor, when Osborne was Chancellor, they had a few unravellings, but not from budgets. Normally it takes a couple of days. This one is blown up in terms of the reaction in a matter of hours. And I think tomorrow, so the Institute for Fiscal Studies is doing its press briefing on its assessment of it as we speak, or actually, sorry, it starts at 10:15. The National Institute of Economic and Social Research has done its own. And of course, the Resolution Foundation is already out. So tomorrow's headlines are going to be all about more people in higher tax, bigger tax, but all the things that we've kind of been talking about, but there's going to be a much more granular assessment and I think a probably unflattering assessment of this spring statement. It's the speed of reaction, which I think is quite interesting.
Yeah.
Just finally, one last question. Miles has asked this, you can ask this one, Lucy. Was Rishi Sunak wearing his £95 sliders while stood behind the dispatch box delivering his speech today? The implication being, yet again, this is the Peloton riding, slider wearing multimillionaire. There's a bit of a whiff of that around.
There is indeed. No, he wasn't, sadly. He was wearing a very sober grey tie, and I must say I noticed his hair has gone considerably more grey since he's taken on the job as Chancellor too.
I think we can't really blame him. I feel the same in the last couple of years. Great to speak to you. Thank you so much for that. It was really, we could have done it for a lot longer, a lot more questions. We might do that again as the economic questions still and the political questions still continue to mount. That's Lucy Fisher, our chief political commentator, and Dominic O'Connell, our business correspondent. Thank you very much indeed.
9:57 at 10 o'clock. Matt Chorley will be here, but he's not here. He's in Leeds.
Beautiful sunny Leeds. The sun is out.
It's sunny everywhere.
I know,
You
it's
can't
so